Hello everybody and welcome to my review of volume number 12 of Reki Kawahara's light novel series Sword Art Online. This is the ongoing Alicization arc. Well, I mean, we might as well say it. At this point, Alicization takes up the rest of Sword Art Online until the new arc begins in Japan, which it has not yet. This one, Alicization Rising. And funny story, it's literally rising because a good chunk of the story is Kirito and Yujio fighting their way up a tower, like literally rising up a tower. And I'm not just making this up, Kawahara says it in the end at the back of it. So this one picks up pretty much exactly where we left off in volume number 11. Kirito and Yujio having escaped from the prisons of the ASCII church at the main cathedral and have been rescued by the mysterious girl calling herself Cardinal. They are, of course, hiding out in this sort of odd space that's been locked away from everywhere else that Cardinal seems to have power over. And the first I would say maybe third of this book is pretty much what we've come to expect in Alicization, which is an info dump. Info dump. I really got to figure out a way to do good, like, voice kind of things. But anyway, so yeah, it's an info dump. Pretty much Cardinal and Kirito having a big old discussion about how the world operates, why the world operates the way it does. It's pretty much an expansion of the conversation that started to happen at the end of volume number 11. And it's kind of funny because the whole time, like, Yujio is just kind of off somewhere else reading a book because, you know, he's a history buff and he's kind of reading books about the true history of the world. It's not quite as boring an info dump as some of the other ones that we've had. Frankly, the whole discussions about the fluct lights and how the whole new dive system works and everything, I kind of found a little bit dry. At least this is world building and is giving us a lot of sort of background about how everything came to be as it is right now. Plus kind of giving us some insight into A, how Kirito and Yujio might actually win in this particular battle, even though they're horribly outnumbered by very powerful foes. And B, if you pay attention to it, kind of gives you, well, I mean, it's not so much if you pay attention to it, but if you start to kind of extrapolate where this is going, it kind of gives you an idea of just where we might go for the next, like, 5 or 6 volumes. The main story of Alicization goes till volume number 18. Volume 19 and 20 are like a side story that's told during Alicization. So we've still got like a good chunk of books to go. So basically what it all kind of boils down to is Cardinal's like, you know what, there is this girl administrator. She runs the whole shebang. I want you guys to kill her for me. That's kind of what it boils down to. And so the rest of the book is Kirito and Yujio fighting their way up the cathedral tower to face Administrator. Now, it's probably no big surprise that this doesn't actually end with that battle. In fact, it ends on a big cliffhanger, which, you know, not really shocking considering, like I said, this is supposed to go on for like another 6 volumes. But the way that the story's told, and I have to say, I really appreciate that Kawahara did this, and it's probably one of the best uses of Yujio in the series. And don't get me wrong, I like Yujio's character. I kind of like the fact that we have another male main character as opposed to it just being like Kirito and his harem of girls and, you know, once in a blue moon, Klein or Aggie will show up. But in this one, so what, in typical Sword Art Online fashion, Kirito, where he's the main point of view character, his stuff is told in first person. And it works fine for the info dump. Like, it really does, actually. It's just fine. I mean, there's nothing too shocking about it. But then once we actually get to the action of the book, it switches to the third-person narrative of Yujio and him as the focal point of view character. And I think this really works because, and I mean, maybe I'm a little biased because I personally prefer Excel World, which is entirely told in third person, but I just kind of feel like Kawahara always writes action sequences way better when they're being done in third person. So it's really good then that the bulk of the action part of this story is told in that voice and told from Yujio's perspective. And I think it's true that it's also kind of fun too, because we all know that Kirito is kind of, well, I mean, he is OP, although he's being put through his paces in this one. That's one thing that I do like. Kirito is not getting off easy in this one. In fact, he gets the snot beat out of him quite a bit. But we all know that Kirito is a sneaky kid, and you know, even though he has sort of like a sense of honor, he always kind of has something up his sleeve. And not having to be in his head and seeing that played out from another character's point of view makes the fights a lot more interesting and unpredictable. The other thing that probably makes this a really strong volume in terms of the battles is that the characters that they are facing are all very, very interesting characters. And if there's any weakness in this volume, it's the fact that because we're ascending floors pretty quick, like, I mean, almost Einkrad Volume 1 quick, like, oh, we're on floor 50. Oh, we're done. Um, this one, you face off against a couple of different foes, and they're all kind of interesting and cool characters, and I can't help but sort of hope they show up in larger roles later on in this storyline. I mean, even just my own imagination, I can kind of think of some ways that that might occur, but I think that it's sort of like a good and bad thing. First, it's a really good thing because, like I said, Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh are facing off against very powerful foes who have interesting powers, who have interesting backstories. Like, even just the little glimpses and hints we get of their character and their backstory and everything else, I found myself very curious about these characters, and I wanting to know more about their histories and everything else. And again, like I said, it makes the battles unpredictable because we really haven't seen any of these characters. They're brand new, their motives are brand new. Their actions and their motives speak very, very highly of just how twisted the Axiom Church has become, in particular its head administrator. I think maybe the only downfall to it is that because there's a number of battles that happen in this one, the second half, or like, the second sort of 2/3 of the book feels a little bit rushed. Like, I almost feel like each one of these characters that they face off against is like a boss character, but it's like you skip all of the in-between bit and you're just like, it's like playing a video game where it's just like one boss battle after another boss battle. And as much as it's kind of cool and everything else, and you're kind of like, oh, that's a cool mechanic and everything, it doesn't really feel like there's a whole lot of story in there. Like I said, I mean, the boss characters have kind of this, there's hints and sort of interesting kind of things, like the one character, oh, I shouldn't ruin it. I don't want to spoil anything, but like there's definitely some things going on in the backstories of these characters. And it's funny to see like how they believe themselves to be heaven sent, and yet there is so much human fallacy in them, which Kirito kind of points out and makes some of them really, really angry about. But but I think like I said, I think the biggest problem is that it just feels rushed. Like, I feel like each one of these characters I would have liked to have spent more time with before they became the boss battle, like I kind of feel like there was a lot more that could have been told or could have been said. And unfortunately, because you're kind of rushing ahead and it's battle after battle after battle, you get into that very sort of cliche thing of like, well, I'm about to defeat you, so I will tell you all about myself or about my powers or about this. And like I said, the action is good. The opponents are suitably strong, and Yu-Gi-Oh and Kirito have to work together and be clever and daring and sacrifice themselves in a lot of ways in order to win and progress, which I really like to see, because there's none of that like, I just grabbed a lance with my pinky and my index finger and then laughed off your attack kind of stuff going on. Like I said, like Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh, they get beat up, and like it's a hard fight. which is something that you really want to see and that I don't think Sword Art's had enough of. Now, this one, of course, omits entirely any of the non sort of underworld characters. We spend no time with Asuna at all. It is strictly Yu-Gi-Oh! And Kirito's story. It works really well given that we really have to have this sort of background and setting up what's about to happen. And like I said, it sort of foretells a major shift again in the narrative in the future, which I won't spoil, but that kind of has me excited too, because I have to admit, I kind of thought that if this whole series was going to be about just fighting the Axiom Church, I was like, this is going to get really drawn out and really boring probably. But now that I kind of have this thought about maybe how this could play out, I'm kind of a little bit more excited about it. And again, like seeing the fight scenes, how well they were done and what the opponents were like, that has me excited too, because I'm like, okay, finally Kirito is challenged, like truly being pushed to his limits, both physically and emotionally. And, you know, he really isn't going to make it out of this without Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, that's the other thing too, is that, you know, they truly are a team, which I appreciate, because so often in Sword Art, it's been like Kirito and everybody else. In this one, no, there's really that sort of bond of friendship and brotherhood and depending on one another to survive that I think is kind of a relationship we haven't really had much of in Sword Art Online. And I like that. I like that that is progressing. And I like seeing a bit of the emotional torture that Kirito's going through, knowing that he really doesn't have much to be afraid of. Like if he dies, he knows that he's alive somewhere else. Whereas he is becoming truly friends with other people in this world that he knows they're not really people. Like that's the other thing that I'm very curious about, is just how that's going to sort of resolve itself. Because it could be a huge letdown, or it could be a very interesting sort of emotional play out to see how that progresses. So volume number 12, I know I know volume 11, I went on a mad rant about one particular thing, and I think it had more to do with just being sick of Kawahara being lazy and using that same thing over and over in Sword Art just to be like, ooh, they're villains, they're evil, they try to rape girls. I won't get into it again. This one moves on. Thank you. Very good. Like I said, the info dumping, it was a little slow, but at the same time, as I said, at least it served a really large purpose in setting up kind of the rest of this arc, gave us world building as opposed to just a techno babble, and lots of really good fight scenes that have me pretty excited to see like what kind of opponents they face going forward, because it's pretty clear they haven't even fought the strongest guys yet. So, and like I said, it ends on a big cliffhanger, which will be very interesting to see how that gets solved. But again, that'll be in the next volume. So volume number 12 of Sword Art Online, the latest in the Alicization arc. Pretty decent volume, all things considered. As I said, would have liked to have seen the battles, maybe one or two less of them, see that drawn out a little bit more, see the villains or the boss characters kind of developed a little bit more, not so much the cliche of now you will learn about me before you die kind of thing. But nonetheless, fairly decent, especially by Sword Art Online standards. If you've been into the series up until now, definitely I think actually this one sets things up to be a bit more, even more interesting. Like I think I'm actually more engaged with where the story is going to go after this volume than I have been after some of the previous Alicization books. So fingers crossed, we'll see how things go in volume number 13 when it comes out. So those are my thoughts on volume number 12 of Sword Art Online. My next review is going to be on a brand new series, a new number 1 volume, and that will be New Life Plus, Young Again in Another World. This one just came out today, actually. I'm filming this on Monday. You'll be watching it Tuesdays when it goes live after I've edited it. But anyway, I just picked this up today. I'm going to try and motor through it and get a review up of this one on Wednesday, because it doesn't look like it's all that long. It's a brand new one from J Novel Club, another one of their new isekai titles, and yeah, we're going to see how this one turns out. So if you're brand new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. I do 2 to 3 reviews every week, as well as a weekly countdown of the top 10 best-selling light novels in Japan. Thank you so much for joining me in this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Till then, bye-bye for now.